What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast. I'm Ronan Gaine. Joining me as always, Chris Nambu. Thank you so much for making this your first podcast for NBA coverage. Remember, you're on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what you think. You're on Apple Podcasts, you're on Spotify. Make sure you leave that 5-star review. You do that, we'll keep producing that content. Gonna have a fun pod today. Pretty Eastern Conference heavy. There's a few teams that I think aren't getting enough shine in the national media that we need to discuss. We're also going to be talking a little bit about the Rockets and Grizzlies. Who's more likely to sustain their top three push in the West? But before we get into it, Chris, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Ready to talk some Eastern Conference. Ready to talk some teams we haven't talked about, especially one guy that we mentioned real quick in the off season that I'm excited to say I'm right. I don't get to do that often, but I think today I get to say I'm right about something. But um, I think I'm also more so excited about the Suns. Why don't we start with the Suns with fast break?
Yeah, let's get into the fast
Is
break. Phoenix
everything
Suns.
going to
What do you got to
change for
talk about
them?
there?
Is this their
And
Daniel Gafford trade? Is this their super role player that you said they need to get? Is Nick Richards going to save the big three in Phoenix? Let's go there.
I mean, I guess it feels like it could be a significant enough change that it could have a big impact. I wouldn't I think this is a fairly significant trade for them. Obviously, they're really tight on the margins with what they're actually able to do. But like upgrading a Kogi to Nick Richards, who can play the center, I guess that they want more of a traditional center. That seems to be the angle that they're going for. They've got fed up with Nurkic and they want this guy in there instead. I'm not gonna go and say Nick Richards is the savior, but I don't think it'd be crazy to see him have a Daniel Gafford sort of impact.
Yeah, and I was saying that half jokingly. I do think that anyone who's thinking that this is just a marginal move, I think he'll actually have an impact. But I do think it's funny that when we have these super teams, you'll have a very small move like this, and then half the league is like, "Oh, I love Nick Richards is my guy." I've always like, no, come on, let's not pretend like he wasn't a very low minutes guy in Charlotte that played here and there and filled Mark Williams' role well and was good. But let's actually bring in the numbers though, because I think the improvement over what they have now is pretty big. And it's not just because I'm a Nurkic hater, because I am, and I'll admit it. But if you look at what they've had, this dude got benched for Iguodala, who's been fun, been athletic center, but not really an NBA level center yet. And they've been this is the crazy part. Um, they're last in points in the paint. Last. And they're 16th in opponents' points in the paint. All three of their centers in the pick and roll are below 33rd percentile, less than 1 point per possession. Like that is a damning stat. I didn't realize they were that bad in the paint. I didn't realize they were that bad in pick and roll. And when you have guys like Devin Booker and Brad Beal, guards who can really operate in the mid range, who can get downhill, and it can really benefit from a rolling center, that's a big part of, I think, maybe why we've seen kind of a down year from both of them. If you look at Richards, he's had almost as many, just talking about the rebounding and the second chance points, he's had almost as many second chance points as all three of these centers combined in only 21 games he's played in this season. And he's 60th percentile in pick and roll, which is far more respectable than the 30% that we look at with these other guys. And, I think they really just needed to have a 7-footer who can play in the paint, who can be physical, and is actually a vertical threat. Besides Mason Plumlee, who you get the odd, alley oop to him here and there. Like Nick Richards is going to have some gravity, like attacking the paint, and at least that'll be a facet of their game they'll have. Whether that saves the season or not, we'll see. I think a lot of what we see throughout the league is are they just missing this one aspect of their game that unlocks everything else? Maybe a vertical threat is a big deal. The way that the Mavs having two vertical threats at all times with their two pick and roll maestros really did a lot for them. But we'll see. I think it's a good move.
Now they just have to find their PJ Washington.
Yeah.
That's the next step for the old Phoenix Suns. But yeah, no, I think you're right. Smart move, good move on the margins. Let's wait and see. Let's see where we are in a month and see what sort of impact that's had on the team.
I got another one. Fast break. Let's go East. Nets had a historic loss, worst loss in franchise history. And it's hilarious because they just came off a really bad tank loss, getting a win over the Trailblazers, and then all of a sudden, half their starting lineup is gone. They all get sat. They have the worst loss. And I think on the flip side, Clippers continue to look good. Kawhi looks efficient. Yes, it's against the Nets, but still keeping tabs on them. This Clippers team that, again, I thought was just going to be in the dust, bottom of the West, continues to look good. How are we feeling about them still?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we mentioned them last week. They're very much like the wait and see kind of thing. Let's see they can sustain this push. They can make this push to stay in the top six. I guess realistically, probably just the sixth place, like we were talking about last week. But yeah, good to see them taking advantage of a terrible team like the Nets, not letting them off the hook, and that's got to be a huge confidence booster just for the Clippers guys. I mean, still there, Kawhi coming back, Norm Powell still probably a top two, maybe a top three contender for most improved player of the year. Uh, Clippers still just very interesting team. I'm really interested to see how they keep on moving forward and does Kawhi stay healthy and stay with the team. That's obviously the major point with them. But yeah, the Nets, damn, that's just it's just so funny when you actually like put it into context like you did there when you actually when you think about it that sort of way. Like it actually like you're
Immediately.
just like
Immediately
okay,
after.
we gotta chill here.
And that tank loss to Portland was pretty significant. Portland goes to 13-26. They were tied with Brooklyn at 13-26. And I believe they may have one more game left, but right now, if they had the same record, Portland would get the tiebreaker and they'd be in a better position percentage wise for the top pick. But moving on. Remember that guy who said he's going to stop dunking?
Mhm.
Last night, John Moran, yes, it didn't count. There's a whistle, but in reality, it did count in my mind because Wemby was trying to block that. He came from the weak side. There was one on one. It was literally like if you were at a park and some dude's like, "Yo, I can dunk over you," and they did a one on one dunk to block competition. And Ja had, I think, the best dunk I've seen in my lifetime. Is that exaggeration? Let me break it down. Like Wemby is the best shot block we've ever seen. 7-4. And that was like one on one. There's nothing else there. Ja got to take off. Wemby got to take off, and he just dunked it right on his head.
Yeah, I mean, it was just so obviously so disappointing that there was a whistle, but like they were both still playing in real time, so like you can count it. But I guess haters will want to. I guess people who like Wemby say it doesn't count. People who like the fact that he got dunked on will say it does count. That's just the way it's gonna go. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I called it out in this pod, but I definitely said it to some guys in work. But I knew Morant was like my top target for a guy that's gonna like either he'll be randomly like somehow block a shot by Wemby or he'll dunk on Wemby. Like he was the guy I was looking at as like that high flyer, small guy that could do something like that to Wembanyama. So it's pretty funny that it's happened, but even funnier that it's technically didn't count.
Yeah, I mean, D pulled a Blake Griffin on him, like just
Yeah.
right over the top. But yeah, so much for not dunking. I mean, that's who he is, man. It's in his DNA. He can't stop doing that. And while we're on Wemby, let's do a quick check-in. So I remember in the beginning of the season, everyone's talking about he's shooting too much, too many threes. It's crazy, like how he's not trying to get in the paint. He's too big for that. Then he starts shooting shot. He starts making those threes. Great 3-point shooter. And then we're like, all right, well, next improvement is maybe he needs to, be a better facilitator, better passer. And he's already started to do that. And he's really clearly the best defender in the NBA. Will probably be one of the best defenders, if not the best defender of all time. And our question in the beginning of the season was, is he going to be like a borderline top 10 player? Will the Spurs even be in the hunt for the playoffs? And I think we have our answer. I think Wemby is clearly a top 10 player, and the Spurs are probably going to make the playoffs. And this all changed within a span of half this season. I think he's jumped miles ahead of what we thought he was going to do and what the Spurs team was going to do pretty quickly.
Chris Paul effect, man. That's what he does. He makes teams better. Especially bad teams. He makes bad teams better. Maybe he doesn't. He's not the difference maker for good teams, but he definitely makes bad teams better. Still not 100% sure I'd be willing to say they're going to make the playoffs. The play in, most likely, yes. The
Well,
playoffs,
sure, sure,
that's
sure,
a
sure, sure, sure.
different question.
Point,
But
sure.
yeah, I think I'd probably still lean towards Wemby just being like a borderline. I think there's certain stretches where I'm like, oh shit, this guy is like top 10, maybe even top five. Then there's other stretches where I see him go like three straight games where he doesn't hit 20 points and the Spurs lose. Then I'm like, still need to see that little bit more from him. Defensive wise, he is just next level. He's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But still, obviously, second year player, so the inconsistencies are still there. But when he's hot and like the Spurs are going on like little win streaks, it's with him doing it on both ends of the floor.
Yeah. I think that the fascinating thing, like when I get the opportunity to watch him, is it's not just the fact that he's taking such deep shots. It's not just the fact anymore, like, oh, he's at his size putting the ball on the floor, but it's like his intelligence on the floor, the way he moves, the way he fills space, the way he cuts, the way like he'll get a post up and like know to give and go at the right moment to catch a lob and like create offense without having the ball in his hand in a way. And it's stuff like that in his second year that I guess you could chalk it up to he's an experienced player already because he played in Europe. But I think the fact that it's a year or two and we see all these little things and he's still coming into play and just the defense, 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 defense. I'll put one stat and we'll move on to the next thing. But if and this is thanks to Thinking Basketball. If you don't follow them on YouTube, check them out. They do such good content. Um, if you look at team defense on and off numbers for Wemby, if you look at percentages at the rim and short mid range, when he is on the floor, the Spurs give up the fewest number of attempts at the rim and the short mid range and the lowest percentage. They are the best defense in basketball in that area when he's on the floor. When he is off, sorry, when he's on, it's like top five. It's the lowest attempts. When he is off, they give up the most. The most. It like the difference is absolutely astounding, and I think that that's where the Spurs still need to go is team building. They still need more. Like these guys are still growing around him, and I think that'll continue to grow. I like Stephon Castle. I like Sohan. I still think Vassell has a little ways to go for me, but still impressed with the team. I know they're 12th. It's so tight. If we look at it today, the Kings have went on a little run. That's always that coaching, head coaching fire effect. That always happens. Warriors 20-20, Suns 19-20, Spurs 19-20. If I had to really pick between these teams and what teams have more room to grow, I think the Suns are kind of stuck. Maybe this Nick Richards thing works out. I think the Warriors are kind of stuck. I think the Kings are pretty stuck. But the Spurs, they have room to grow and they've continued to grow. I don't know. I have if I'm gonna bet on any one of those teams, I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards the Spurs than I thought I would. I'm not ready 100% yet, but I'm leaning that way.
No, I like that. I respect that. I'll just try. Did you see that stat about the Golden State Warriors? They're the first team in NBA history to start a season 12-3 and be below 500 at any point in that season.
That's
They're back at 500 now with the win last night, but that was an absolutely insane stat to see.
that's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, when you look at the starts to a season, they're usually so prognostic. Like don't look too quick, but all the teams that have started, like the Cavs, have been in, almost all of them have been in the NBA Finals. But maybe we'll get into that later. But yeah, that is shocking. That is shocking. The best and the worst of the Warriors this season's been tough. Where to next?
We wanted to talk Celtics, didn't you, before we get into the more deeper topics?
Oh yes, I do have a quick fast break. And it's more of a question. So we covered efficiency in the league. We love talking about our 50, 40, 90. We always have someone to crown. It's usually one, at most two guys. Who do you think? You'll never guess it. You'll never guess. I'll just let you try and guess. But who do you think is the only player currently at this mark?
The entire NBA?
Yeah, entire NBA.
50, 40, 90.
I'll let you. I'll tell you. It's a forward. It's a big guy.
Hmm. I'm gonna throw out someone wild that I do not think is the answer at all.
And
Let's
I'll
say
tell you,
Nas Reed.
decent guess. He's had a little down year efficiency wise this year. He plays for one of the top 5 teams in the NBA, and he's in the Western Conference. I'll do one better. He
Is he
plays
on the
for
Grizzlies?
the Thunder.
He plays for the Thunder. Is it? It's not Shea, is it?
He's a
No,
big.
he's
It's
a big.
Kenrich Williams. Kenrich
Yeah,
Williams.
I was never getting
And
that.
on somewhat decent minutes, like 13 minutes a game, not playing at all. But when you look at guys who are on the fringes of it, I was curious to see this. The 2 players who are actually close to this, who would we would typically crown, are Kyrie Irving, who's had such a fantastic year. Hopefully, he can get healthy by the end of it for the playoffs. And Darius Garland. Those 2 guys neck and neck. Darius Garland. Just wanted to point that out because we've been talking Cavs and we've mentioned Garland and how great he's been this year, but his efficiency has just been fantastic.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that's
um,
impressive. Yeah,
yeah,
if ever you're in conversations like that with Kyrie Irving, that's a good place to be.
yeah. And on that note, the Cavs have been great. We've been talking about them. I think we'll continue to be talking about them. And you contrast that with the Celtics. Celtics were not too interesting to talk about in the beginning of the season, to be honest. I think we tried to do like a little Eastern Conference preview and be like, who's going to be the best team in the East? Who's going to probably come out of the East? And it wasn't really that interesting because it's like, duh, it's the Celtics. The Celtics are far and away the best. People are starting to use the dynasty word with them. And I'm not, and I thought it was too soon then. Dynasty that has pretty big implications, especially in a league that we're in now that has so much parity. But I think recently we've seen them be beatable. We've seen them be not just beatable, but fallible. Like they're not just this well-oiled machine that they were at the end of the season last year, and not gonna get too like panicky about it. I don't think there's anything to panic about it, but it makes things interesting in the East, man, because I think there's possibilities that this team has been figured out to a degree, and they beat themselves still sometimes. I mean, just looking at their starting lineup, it's not looked good. I mean, they are right now, their starting lineup playing like a bottom 10 team. They're playing like the Pelicans, who almost beat them. There's a CJ McCollum shot from losing to them. And if you look at 138 minutes that the starting lineup's been playing, they've been outscored by 9 points per 100 possessions. Their offensive efficiency is 28th for the season, and their defensive efficiency is 25th. So their lineup that they want to run out there in the playoffs, unbeatable lineup, has not played well. And it kind of raises questions about when it will get good, if it's just, effort, if it's just championship hangover. But they've not played well with their starting lineup with KP, and it's a bit surprising.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wish I could make myself make a bigger deal of this than I am right now. I'm kind of ready to play it down.
Yeah.
Playing, probably, I guess you could say, probably fairly significantly worse considering they were at such a high level last year. Still the second seed, still almost definitely going to finish as the second seed, probably at the worst. Maybe the third seed is the worst spot that they're going to finish. Maybe we'll look back on this and say it was a sign of things when we get to the playoffs, but I'm still in the camp of like they know who they are. They're pretty much all eyes are just ready to go for playoff time. So I won't jump on it now, but I think that's an area that we're going to look back on, like losing to that Raptors team. They wouldn't lose to that Raptors team last year. I think we can all say that. So I think
They
for
definitely
right
wouldn't give
now,
up 60 points in the paint to the Raptors last year.
yeah,
Definitely not.
yeah. I'm not gonna say right now that there's the panic alarm needs to go off, but when we see if they start to look a bit shakier in the playoffs, we'll point back to these sort of things that we're seeing right now.
Yeah. And I think that what we didn't see last year was them have a difficult path. And I think we've done a good job of not like over of harping on that, like, oh, the Celtics had an easy path. That's why they're there. I think we did a good job like covering why they were that good and their defense was that good. But if they're gonna go into the playoffs still having a bottom 10 interior defense and you're gonna face the Knicks, might face the Magic. I mean, you might even face, ultimately you're going to face the Cavs. And the interior scoring of those teams, could be a problem. And it could be interesting. You
Mhm.
went 7 games last year against the Pacers squad that was just decimated. That, or sorry, you went four games and every game was close. What I meant to say, against a Pacers squad who had nobody. I wouldn't be surprised if they're getting in more 7 game series in the playoffs this year, given what we've seen. I think if you asked me at the beginning of the season, the difference that I was at then is that if all things are the same, they're gonna just blow through the playoffs again. You're gonna sweep everybody. But that's not the case this year. I like that. It's interesting. And Celtics have things to figure out. Gives us something to talk about besides just assuming the end outcome. And I like it. So far, the East has ended up being more interesting than I thought it would be.
Yeah, for sure. And let's stay on those interesting teams because there's a team that we definitely need to talk about in the Indiana Pacers, the team that made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals last year.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I have another quiz for you. Who do you think is the most efficient ISO scorer in the league? Number one in points per possession in isolation.
Well, if this is to do with the Pacers, I'm gonna have to guess Siakam.
No, I like that guess, but it's pretty obvious. When I say it, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. TJ McConnell.
Oh,
TJ
that dick,
McConnell.
yeah.
TJ McConnell. But let's get into the Pacers, man. I think we've mostly been disappointed in them to start the season. Been mostly concerned about Halliburton not having that all-star form that he had last year, and started to question if that was just a blip. If they're sort of just like the Kings were, which, looking back at it, some odd comparisons when you think about the origins of these teams. But have they convinced you? We'll start there. Have they convinced you with this recent run that they're back on track to getting to where they were last year?
Yes, yes and no. I don't think they're better than they were last year.
No.
And I have no reason to believe that they're gonna get better than they were last year. It's pretty much just still the same unit. We're still technically seeing a worse version of Halliburton than the all-star near MVP guy we saw at the start of last season. They're on a 12-4 run. It's a great run of form. They're about up to 22 and 19. That gets them very much up into the conversation for the I guess probably the 4 or 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. But it just feels like the same old with the Pacers. They're just that team that they're gonna make you play your best. But if they're playing their best and let's say the Bucks, the Knicks, the Cavs, the Celtics are playing their best, I still back those 4 teams to beat the Pacers. They're just that team you don't really want to face, but it's more about being okay, we can't take a night off here. We're gonna have to give it our best, but I still don't think them at their best versus the top 4 teams in the East at their best, they still come out at the bottom.
That Here's where I'll push back a little bit because I think offensively they are not quite where they were last year. I mean, last year was such a whirlwind with how Halliburton was playing. But I think the defense is a big deal. I think their defense has been significantly better during this recent stretch, especially with Nemhard back in the lineup. And I think that's something to lean on. And I'll put some numbers on it. I mean, when Nemhard was out in those 12 games, they just completely sunk. They were not able to have any point of attack defense. Their offense was really sluggish. But if you look at this starting lineup, they've been I mean, they've been really good. If you look at lineups for 300 or more minutes, they are the best defensive lineup in the league with Halliburton, surprisingly with Halliburton, Nemhard, Mathurin, Turner, Siakam. They have a defensive rating of 97.7. That's in 344 minutes. They have a net rating of 18. I mean, that's something real there. You can put up good defense. And you've seen it too. We've seen them have great defensive performances and get stops that I think last year he was really like, we're just gonna run this other team out of the building. Just gonna outscore them. But I think they have a different dynamic now where, okay, Halliburton's not going to, drop 30. He's not going to be this world beater. He's still going to be one of the best facilitators in the league, dynamic playmaker. But their defense, I mean, that's got to come for something. I think we always talk about how defense is going to be what's going to take you far in the playoffs. And if they've evolved in that way, I think I can convince myself.
Yeah, yeah, I get no, that is fair, 'cause especially on this run that they've been on. So like usually you kind of see teams like how we've had difficult starts and go on a run like this, you would be thinking, oh, Halliburton's up probably averaging 25 and 10 here,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or Siakam's been averaging like 25 points per game or something like that. But it hasn't been that at all. They've all pretty much stayed exactly where they have been for the whole year. And that's where the defense comes into it. And that's where it makes that difference. Like you think Halliburton didn't play the entire second half and they were able to beat the Cavs. Like that's a
Hmm.
big deal. Don't get me wrong, when they rematched there on Tuesday night, when there was no Halliburton in the lineup, I was kind of like, okay, I don't really think the Pacers are going to have a shot here, and that ultimately came to be true. But they pushed him really hard, and that's the defensive side. And Empire just brings that energy, and they're just like they're like a almost like a diet OKC. They're just so pesky
I
and
hate
handsy.
OKC.
They're so like pesky and handsy on defense, and that
Yeah,
they're just going to be
yeah.
so annoying to play against. Like you see that when certain times when Garland and Mitchell were handling the ball, and it's always around them in their face. Like McConnell brings that energy, Nembhard, Ben Shepherd, like they all kind of bring that same
Hmm.
sort of energy, and that's definitely an area that they've obviously turned to more this year, and not been all about the offense. But I think that's also they're slightly worse shooting the ball. Halliburton is not quite at the level you want him to be at. I think that has also had an impact on why maybe they aren't putting together a better run because the defense is there, but obviously we know Nembhard obviously is a big part of that, and he's missed a lot of games.
Yeah, I think if we look back on the run that they'll have from December on, I think they will shape out. And I think the stats will speak for themselves as they normalize a bit. Um, I will say that what's forgotten a lot, and he's always forgotten. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Siakam. That's why I said it. I mean, he's their all NBA player that they got last year. Not talked about much at all. I mean, his shots really bounced back this season. He's shooting over 40% from three on almost double the volume. He's 44% from the corner. And that's where he becomes dangerous, is because when you have to get out on him, he's such a dangerous cutter. And he's been such a threat inside. We knew that he was going to really add that, but the inside outside game didn't really formulate as much as we thought it would last year. That we just noticed there wasn't really the same chemistry we thought they might have. This year, he's shooting 77% in the paint. That is an elite number. Like they have elite inside scoring with him there. Um, and the other addition that's really been surprising, and I know it's been on kind of limited minutes, like 13 minutes here, 15, 18. He's not gotten a ton of run, is Thomas Bryant on December 13th. Just coincidentally, they start going on this run since they get Thomas Bryant. I'm not going to say, I mean, maybe he has just been
He
this
is the
energy
man.
catalyst, but hey, maybe that's what they need over in the Suns from Nick Richards. But let's say this. I mean, his energy is so palpable on the floor when he comes on. And the Pacers have just been flat out the worst offensive rebounding team in the league. In just 13 minutes per game, Thomas Bryant has averaged 1.5 offensive rebounds. He only gets 2.5 rebounds. That's like almost all his boards are offensive rebounds. They're plus 4.1 with him on the floor, plus 7.7% in offensive rebounds. Just energy getting from a guy like that. Just wanted to shout out Bryant because the team loves him and he's really fit in with that energy. And I think getting it's like the little things throughout the season, the little building blocks that play into playoff runs that we start to talk about later on. And it would be a shame to miss it because I think guys like Thomas Bryant are the small pieces to the puzzle that create a really really good team. You need like minutes from guys like that. You need your Nemhards. You need stuff like that. Not just Halliburton's not having a good season. It's either him having a good season or not. It's all these little things, and I think the Pacers embody that, and I think they're a deep, deep team. When you look at the guys up and down the roster, like Shepard as well, um, and I I want to bring him up. I know you're gonna. I don't want you to pull up his box score. Don't do that. Don't do that to me before I do it. But have you seen anything interesting about Jarris Walker?
Yeah, I mean, it's just we're slowly starting to see what we expected. I mean, what was it, 2 years ago that he was drafted now, and we barely got to see him at all. And we
Barely.
were kind of like, isn't he meant to be like the missing piece? Isn't he meant to be
Yeah.
that like defensive difference maker for this Indiana team? And he's not playing crazy minutes. He's not. It's still a very small sample size that we're seeing, but we're slowly starting to see him earn the trust of Rick Carlisle. We're slowly starting to see him develop as an NBA player. Hopefully, he's still got a long ways to go. That's I guess the Pacers are got to be hoping that as well. But the flashes have been nice.
Because I don't think there's been like really a wave yet. Maybe I'm getting a little ahead of the wave. I'm getting on this island a little too soon. But the minutes I've seen have been impressive. First of all, on the defensive end, he's so switchy. He's got way quicker feet than I thought for his size. The fact that at times when he was switched on to Garland or Mitchell, or the quickness with which he's, showing help from the middle and then rotating back. I mean, he's a defensive weapon. It hasn't come out consistently yet, but you can see it. And plus, with his size, if you want to post up a big on him, he's too strong. Like you're not going to put him all the way into the paint. Like you can trust him to guard a lot of fives in this league. But what was really interesting to me, I don't know if you noticed it, but on some possessions, they're having him run some big, big pick and roll. Have him put the ball in his hands and see what he can do. And this is coming from a Bulls fan that I've been waiting for years for Patrick Williams to be that like prototypical like big wing creator. And you just can tell when guys are uncomfortable or comfortable with it. And Jarris Walker looked decently comfortable. I mean, like he was able to get into a midi and bigs are dropping, and he's okay taking that shot. He looks comfortable with that shot. Shooting almost 45% of that. It's not a crazy number, but it's on volume. He's scoring 1 point per possession on it, or 0.97. I mean, that's a pretty comfortable number for a guy like him who we're not expecting to do it at all. And if he has this much polish as a guy that we expected just to be kind of a spot up 3-point shooter and a defensive tool, if he's going to do that on both ends, I have some really interesting ideas of, what that player could be if they continue to develop him, just with how polished he looked at with the ball in his hands at times. It's flashes. It's flashes, but I'm curious what their idea of who he is and how Rick Carlisle will continue to develop that because he's started to get a lot more minutes recently.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's arguably kind of the most interesting area to watch with the Pacers is the growth of Jarvis Walker, where he ultimately lands, and like what level of player, like what level of impact he can ultimately have with this team. That could be a kind of a difference maker to how much you want to believe in this defense, kind of staying forward and them sustaining their spot. I guess obviously they were Eastern Conference Finals last year, sustaining their spot as a legitimate contender in the Eastern Conference. I still think when we get to playoff time, you're gonna need to see Halliburton. Like you're going to need to see him average like 24 and 10 really to really make these guys difference makers. Mathurin also, he's
Up and
just not really
down.
doing it. Mathurin's just been kind of like there and he's fine and he does a little bit of scoring, but just still hasn't really got to that level that I really want to see from him that I've
Yeah.
always expected from him. I've always been real high on Mathurin, and it's good to see him more healthy this year, but I'm still not seeing as much as I would like.
Yeah. I've been trying to. I think you and me both have had high hopes for him, but I brought up Jarris Walker too to kind of contrast a little bit in terms of what we see from Mathurin, and I think progress is not linear, and we'll talk about a couple guys in a minute about being patient. I think we should still be patient with Mathurin, but sometimes it's really the way he plays in the half court that just frustrates me sometimes. Like he'll get into old habits of holding the ball a little too long, not attacking, not immediately shooting, not immediately passing. And this Pacer squad, they need him to do that. They need him to make those quick decisions. And honestly, like you look at the minutes from Jarris Walker, you just feel a little bit more basketball feel from him when he's quickly cutting into space, when he's deciding to go set a screen, when he gets the ball and he gets into that pick and roll action. It's nothing crazy elite, but sometimes when you're looking, I feel like at these young players and you think about like what their basketball feel is, it hasn't felt like Matherin's has evolved enough to where I'm having more faith that he's going to get there.
Mm.
And long term, you have to think about like I wonder what his role is going to be there because I felt like this was a defining year. You don't have Buddy Hield, you know, Halliburton's not at the level he was last year. Like the role is wide open for him to be that perimeter creator for them, and it's been mostly on Nemhard to take that on. Matherin's still been tertiary,
Yeah.
so
Interesting team to watch there. They're still like it's like they're there, they're not there. We still have the young guys that we still haven't fully seen develop. The Pacers are just a very
yeah.
interesting team to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think overall they're in a good spot. You look at a lot of teams and they haven't struck that balance of having young talent to develop and being competitive. And the Pacers are there. I mean, they're not, I think they still have a ways to go before they're truly like contending. And it's possible that the Eastern Conference Finals was kind of the peak of their potential. And if you strike out the averages, maybe they're kind of a first round, second round exit. But they still got young guys to grow with. And I think that's going to be interesting to watch in the future. Um, we talked about the Cavs a lot. I don't think we need to. We talked about Evan Mobley a lot, and he's just been fantastic this year. I think he's going to be an all NBA player, all defense, obviously. Other guys from the 2021 draft that we haven't mentioned. Let's go out west real quick. Jalen Green. The Rockets have continued to surge, and they were the most interesting team for us in the beginning of the season because we were just curious how they're going to figure out how they want to play. And maybe it was going to be messy, but it'd be interesting to watch the mess because we thought there'd just be talent to rise up from it. But they have constantly, I think, broken through any expectations. And I think Jalen Green too is breaking through some expectations. The quick question to think about this is this just another blip? Is this just another flash that he has? Or is he like starting to round out into the player he's supposed to be for this Rockets team?
Starting a little bit earlier this year. The traditional run that he likes to go
I
on
think
later
so,
in the
yeah.
season. It's starting a little bit earlier this year. Over like this is like they're on a great run. Over the last 6 games, he's averaging 32 points per game, 54% from the field, 50% from deep. They're 5-1 in that period. It's just so hard to like say yes, this is the different moment because we've seen this stretch before. We've seen him have an unbelievable finish to last season. Then the start of this season, kind of look back to the same guy that he was. Now we're seeing him do it, get on this run again. Is this the sign? I mean, it's a wait and see on him. As much as I want to believe in it, and when he's good, he is really red hot. He is a great player to watch, but until like I see him like finish out the season like this and then start next season like this, I can't say that this is the moment that I'm actually saying this is him evolving because he is still
That's
such a young player. So it's like it's fair, but I'm like I need to see it end one season and to begin the next season before I fully buy into
ever the cautious investor.
it.
But I think the really encouraging part of this for Green is that last season, a lot of it was out of necessity from injuries, Şengün not
Yeah.
being there. Um, this time, you get pretty much full roster. We don't have Jabari Smith. We don't have Tari Eason, but you have Şengün. You have Fred VanVleet out there. Dylan Brooks is out there. Eamon Thompson. Um, and I think what's fascinating about our question at the beginning of the season about like how is this team going to play? We've seen different iterations. We talked about how they just had too much Fred VanVleet, too much pick and roll, too much pick and roll. And I almost feel like they've struck a balance now with Jalen Green being a primary creator. Like he's go to. It's not let's get Şengün going and then sprinkle in some Jalen Green. It's let's get Jalen Green going where they're having two on the ball and they have to really get out on the perimeter and then Şengün has more space in the middle and Şengün can play from there. A lot of the space that unfortunately Şengün is he's been missing a lot of easy shots. I mean
Yeah.
Şengün should be averaging like 30 and 15 right now, but he's just missing so many free throws, so many easy shots. I feel like he's in his own head right now. But the concept is there. Concept is there, and Jalen Green is getting these shots from the perimeter, and he's creating a pick and roll, and you're able to get Şengün some space in the middle, and then he can whip the ball from there. And we've seen how the Rockets have been passing the ball more. It feels like that could be the final shape of the Houston Rockets, and that's with Jalen Green at the helm, Alperen Şengün being that secondary playmaker. and everyone else filling their role. We don't need Fred VanVleet to score 28 tonight to win. Let's see what Jalen Green can do, and he's really delivered. I mean, the most promising thing too is playing against really important games against Memphis. They've won 3 consecutive games against them, and in those 3 games, he's averaging 33 points. Scored 34 on Denver. I think he's coming, and I know we've seen it before the Flash, and not sure, but I think the poise that he's had and the fact that he's made quicker decisions, speaking on that, and been more willing to share the ball, it's looked really good. I'm
Yeah,
hopeful.
yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, that's what I mean. I was listening to the Hoop Collective, and the guys were talking about Jalen Green and the Rockets, and they kind of mentioned that, how like this is how my reaction to that Jalen Green contract that he got this offseason was like, this is a very tradable deal. But the point that Houston were making about it is it's actually still a lot of money, and we're hoping that he opts out of that player option that he has, and we can max him out then. They're like,
Yeah,
that's like, we want him to be at that level when it gets to the end of his
yeah,
deal. So it's like, it's interesting to kind of hear that side of it too. That's actually a very good point.
yeah. And staying in the 2020 draft, so Jalen Green's doing his thing, getting a shine. Evan Mobley is. I have not heard much to anything about Cade Cunningham and the Detroit Pistons, who, yeah, sure, maybe we're not out here to celebrate 500 teams, but did we forget that they lost, what was it, 28 straight games last year? They're dead last, and they start 2025 and they won 7 of 8 here. They won in Madison Square Garden. Cade got dropped 29 points in the second half, and it feels like crickets
With 4 fouls.
with 4 fouls. It's crickets. No one wants to talk about it. So let's talk about it. Cade's averaging 24 and a half points, 9.4 assists, 6.6 rebounds on 50% from the floor, 38% from three, and 80% from the line. You know what he's shooting on pull-up three-pointers? He's shooting 37.5%, which is ninth best.
Nice.
This guy, we're saying, okay, he doesn't have the shot creation from the perimeter. He's not really that great at getting on inside. He's answered that. And what was it? It was, oh, you need actual players around you. Everyone made fun of the Pistons for picking up these old quote unquote useless players, which was just a complete lie. Tobias Harris was overpaid. He's a good player. Tim Hardaway Jr. overpaid, good player. Malik Beasley in situations, good player. Give this guy some good players. Cade Cunningham is. I mean, is he a superstar? I mean, he looks like he's a burgeoning superstar. And how many guys do you know that are scoring at this rate, being top 3 in assists? Who? Trae Young, Luka. Guess what? He's scoring on a higher efficiency in pick and roll than those guys. I think he's still a tier below your Brunsons and your Shays of the world. But in terms of like your primary creator, scorer, I mean, he's 1B. He's
Yeah.
he's maybe tier 2, but I mean, he's right there.
No, I mean we're seeing everything you would want to see from him this year, especially after getting that max contract. A few people kind of had their question marks because he'd been injured and we hadn't really got to see the best of him. But then this year he's healthy. They have a team that makes sense around him. They've got a really good coach in JB Bickerstaff, and it's all starting to make sense. And Cade is looking like the number one overall pick. He's looking like a legit playmaker. I think it's only Trae Young and Halliburton have more point and assist double doubles than him this year. He's got the third most triple doubles. This is a guy who is extremely talented, and you're just seeing the fruits of this. Like, don't get me wrong. Let's say 2, 3 years down the line, when I guess the Pistons probably expect to be a legitimate contender in the Eastern Conference. Are Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley going to be a part of that? Most likely, no. But that's you gotta just accept that these are like the building blocks. These are like the
Yeah.
players that you bring in to help develop the team, help the team to learn what it means to win. And then you make moves around the margins to get your legitimate roster around the team that is actually going to be your core, that you're actually going to believe is going to be in your starting lineup in your core group when you're actually competing to be the best in the NBA. That's not where the Pistons are right now. This is the year about learning how good Cade is, learning how to win again, and then they'll continue to develop it on from here.
Yeah, and I think that, it's similar to when we looked at the Magic and we kind of saw that they were like 500-ish, exciting, but a lot of talent and not a lot of results. And they brought in new coaching, brought in Mosley, and how much of the culture changed and how much, they had a vision of who they are as a team and how much that's evolved to now where I'm we're not talking about Magic here in the podcast, but I'll say it over and over again. I think that they're not the team you want to face in the Eastern Conference playoffs, and I think they're going to do some things that surprise people. And I think this Pistons team is well on their way there because we've never questioned their talent. I've never questioned how good I think that Cade Cunningham can be. Never sold my stock. I think that Jaden Ivey can be that real like secondary star next to him. And
That
it's
injury was a
so
killer.
oh my
That
gosh, I
injury is
don't
such a killer. You just
um
hope that it doesn't have
awful.
a lingering problem with him, which is it's always tough with those sort of serious injuries. So yeah, that was
It
such a
looked like
killer.
it
He was
was
playing so well.
based on what I read on it. It was bone injury. It was fractures, and it wasn't like their ligamentous injury, like something that you worry about long term. So hopefully that's the case. I mean, just going down the line too, like Asar Thompson. I'll have to say first of all, Ament is clearly the better player, but still, Asar Thompson in that role, like he's a guy you can be excited about long term. Ron Holland Jr., I think that he down the line could be. I still think he could be like the highest potential player in the class. And Isaiah
Sasser's an
Stewart, Jalen
interesting one
Duren,
too.
yeah. Sasser is like your quintessential like off the bench scorer
Yeah.
and what he can do for the point guard position. I think that they have the roster for it. So when we just think about like long term too, like they needed these vets to come in the room and to mentor them and to get them in the spot that they needed to be.
Yeah, that's exactly what they've done it correctly. They finally feel like they're on the right path. Like let's not forget, this is a team that's won a total of 31 games over the last two seasons. They've already won 21 this year, so they're well on their way to, I'd say at the very least, equaling that total this year alone. So I think the Pistons are back on. They've kind of finally feel like they're back on the right track. Not going to say they're ready to compete. Not going to say they're close to contention or anything like that. But they finally feel like they're back. They're back on the right pathway to achieving success and kind of just reinstating their presence as a legit NBA franchise because they are historically have been one of the better NBA franchises. So
Yeah.
it's good to see them getting back
It's
towards
good to
that.
have a good Detroit Pistons team. We haven't had one. I mean, I
It's been
mean
like 15
Blake,
years.
the closest thing we
Literally.
got was the Blake Griffin Pistons, and that
Yeah.
that did not do much. So let's just put our stake on it. Are they making the playoffs? Are they making the play? Are they making the play in? I think the answer to that
Yeah.
is yeah.
I think they lose in the final of the play-in. That's my prediction.
Oof. Like if they're facing the Heat or the 76ers,
Just the
which is
fact that it could be any like it could range from any team from like that's not I wouldn't think of it that, but like technically it could range from any team from like the Pacers to the Bucks to the Heat to the 76ers, which is I think is maybe a bit too far for them.
yeah. Um, let's say in the 2021 draft, I have one last team. Real quick, a team that no one's talked about, probably for good reason, but we talk about bad teams a lot, right? Pretty often. I think we talk about bad teams. Why are they so bad? We make fun of them, blah blah blah.
Yeah, we do talk about the Lakers a lot, so I guess that's right.
But you know who's really avoided that is the Toronto Raptors, who every year I feel like I'm like excited for. I'm ready for them to take a step forward. They're 10-31. They're just bad. They're bad. RJ Barrett got excited about it for a second. Scottie Pippen coming back, got excited that they'd built something together.
Scotty
What is
Barnes, you
going
mean?
on? Or Scotty Bonds, yes.
If Scottie Pippen wanted to come back, that'd be great for them, yeah.
I I I don't understand how a collection of that talent. I mean, similar to like the Pistons last year. Like
Yeah.
I thought Pistons last year with that collection of talent and new coaching would figure something out. I can't understand how a team with the talent of Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, and maybe we were a little too high and quickly, too quick. And Jakob Poeltl, who's a good center, should be a good like defensive piece. They should be a good defensive team. Rising talent of Grady Dick, They got in a hungry off night, Sacramento Kings. It just seemed like they had the ingredients to put together something, anything. They should have been better than the Brooklyn Nets. They should have been better than the Brooklyn Nets. That should have been a no-brainer. They shouldn't be marginally better than the Charlotte Hornets and the Washington Wizards.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was pretty high on them. I'm pretty sure when we did our over/under predictions, I'm pretty sure I was like smashing them to do the over. They're gonna fall well below,
This is why we don't gamble, man.
fall well below that. Uh, ultimately, I think it could work out if they end up with like a top five pick this year. That could be the missing piece to really be the star that maybe Scotty Barnes is like. When Scotty Barnes is like your B option in reality, and they need to find their A option, and that could be what they find this year in the draft. So it could ultimately work out, but no doubt that they are absolutely they've been one of the most disappointing teams in the entire league, to be honest, this season. Like we both, especially I think me, had high expectations. I believed in Scotty coming back and really starting to look like a legit all-star caliber 1A talent. Hasn't really happened. RJ Barrett, he's RJ Barrett. That's just who RJ Barrett is. He's gonna go through 2 3 week stretches where you think, oh my God, why did the Knicks ever give up on him? And then he's gonna come back down to earth and you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that's unfortunately just that's just the way it goes with a guy like RJ Barrett. So he's like the next coming of Tobias Harris in a way, I think. I think that's what we're going that ultimately is what RJ Barrett, the level he's going to be at. Can get really hot, can look really good, but ultimately he's not a guy that's going to be a two option or probably even a three option on a legit contender. The pieces are
Yeah,
still there for the Raptors, but no doubt hugely disappointing campaign.
yeah. I mean, uh, he's truly come down to earth. Like he's taking 18 shots per game,
They have the flashes, but they have the
18
flashes
shots per game, averaging
as
22 points.
as a team, like beating the Celtics last night. Like they've had some impressive wins. They pushed the Knicks real close. Did they beat the Knicks? Or maybe not. They just pushed them close. Like there's flashes there where you say like there is a team here. I'm more inclined that they're probably just needing that 1A option to really kind of ultimately have this team actually make sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many functional pieces on this team. Like so many teams
Mhm.
that I would be like, oh, that they would be great in this role and that role. Like I believe in the shooting of Grady Dick. I believe in the shooting and defense of Ochai Agbaji. I like those players.
Yeah.
I love the fact that Davion Mitchell's the kind of guy that in a playoff we've seen it. We've seen him guard Steph Curry. There's not a lot of guys who gave Steph Curry problems, and Davion Mitchell did that. You have a guy like that. And maybe Manuel quickly we were too quick on, but I mean he's still a guy that I think has talent. Like he's a at least a very good, off the bench
He's been hurt a
point
lot
guard.
as well this year, so it's kind of
Yeah.
tough to gauge him.
So I guess the reason I bring them up is number one, because they've been this bad with their talent and we haven't talked about them. And Scotty, I think he's not taken a big step forward in terms of his offensive game. We haven't seen that jump shot evolve. He's still who he is, which is such a fun passer, really great vision for his size, good rebounder, good defender. But in terms of being like the guy, just hasn't developed offensively to do it. But I mean, just look up and down this roster. Is this a situation where they're just like some functional pieces away from it making sense? Or is this like just too much noise and not enough like real talent on the roster to be a team that you rock with in the future?
Yeah, that's what I can't put my finger on that right now. It's tough to decide which lane they're in. And I guess we'll start to see it make more sense when we see where they end up in the lottery. I guess that's when we'll see if it makes starts to make a little bit more sense. It's just yeah, very weird situation in Toronto right now.
Yeah. Um, that does it for a 2021 lottery, guys.
Well, let's finish out the show. Let me ask you this question.
Uh
We've seen the Rockets and the Grizzlies. Don't worry, it's not a quiz. We've seen the Rockets and the Grizzlies go
Sweating.
head to head twice over the last couple of weeks. The Rockets have won both games narrowly. Second and third still. in the Western Conference. Which one of these teams do you think is more likely to sustain the top three seed in the Western Conference?
Mm. Okay, the obvious answer is the Grizzlies. If you have to pick both, it has to be the Grizzlies. You've seen them do it before, and Ja looks good. Edie's still growing, but the impact he's had on the floor when he's there is undeniable. Clark looks healthy. Hopefully, Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be good to go. But you have to say the Grizzlies, just purely out of what they've done over the last several years when they're healthy.
I disagree. I have more faith in the Rockets.
Why?
I think we are seeing the impact of Memphis being too reliant on too many guys over the last little stretch. They're currently on a run of over the last 10 games, they've gone 5-5. Lost those couple of games to the Rockets, albeit narrowly. Ja still a little bit in and out of the lineup. Guys like your Scottie Pippen Juniors and guys of that nature not performing at the same level they were at the start of the year. So I have a little bit more faith in Houston, and I believe what they're doing is more sustainable. They're on a 17-7 run right now, 27-12. Jalen Green obviously he's red hot. They're doing something that the Knicks did and provided them with great success last year. They're absolute demons on the offensive boards, averaging 14 and a half per game, which leads the league. Of course, the Grizzlies still right up there. They're 26-15. They're going just behind. They're top five in what offense, defense, first in pace, first in points, first in free throws made, free throws attempted. Same with field goals. Like they are a red hot team. They have all like the little things that make a great team, but like I was saying, I think they should maybe look to cash in on some of their role pieces to get more guys you can actually believe in. And I think we're kind of seeing why that makes
Okay.
some sense on this current stretch.
Okay. That I see what you're saying. Well, here's the question though. For me, it comes down to at the top of the roster, who do you believe in more down the stretch? And I love Jalen Green. I'm gonna wear his jersey on my trip to Texas in a couple days. I'm gonna be rocking that. I believe in this guy. But my belief is backed by evidence and what I know Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant are capable of when it comes down to it. And if these guys can stay healthy, you're talking about top end talent. I mean, they have the top end talent. They have that there. And maybe they still need to cash in, but I think that their program has consistently been deep. And well, I think we'll keep disagreeing on this as throughout the season because I still think that's just part of who they are is like running deep. And like the reason they can play so fast is that everyone's energy is consistently there. Everyone comes fresh off the bench and they can run hard, they can play hard and do it on both ends of the ball as well. But I mean, for all that, I mean, the Rockets embody that too. That's why it's such a fun matchup. Like they both have such very similar spirits in the game.
Yeah, and I'd even say like I think that will stand to the Grizzlies maybe better when we actually get to the playoffs. But I think in the
Yeah,
regular season, that's why I'm kind of favoring the Rockets regular season
yeah,
style, and then Grizzlies, I'd have more faith in them winning a playoff series. That's kind of how I would look at it right now. I'd have to look at the schedule. I feel like the Rockets have had a semi nice schedule over the last little stretch. I wonder if the Grizzlies are due a nice little run of place facing some losing teams that we've seen a few other teams have.
yeah. But when we talk about the Rockets stretch, you have to mention the Blazers and the
Mhm.
Pelicans and such. But at any rate, both those teams, you know, I think that they're going to. If I have to answer it, I need to say both, and that's a major compliment when you look down below them and you look at the Nuggets. I mean,
They're
the
the only
Nuggets
team,
are,
really. They're the only team that you fear cashing them, unless the Mavs get healthy after the All-Star break and go on a similar run that they did last year. It really feels like it's only the Nuggets that have a chance of catching either of them.
yeah. I guess looking down, I mean, what team? I think that maybe the more appropriate question is, what team do you think would surprise us and overtake these two hungry young teams who have figured themselves out, I think, and are going full speed? I think there's a handful of very, very good teams that have not, gotten into regular season form yet. Mavs don't have Luca. Lakers. Are they a good team? Maybe not. But the T-Wolves, I mean, they're still. Is there a moment where things crystallize for them and they figure things out in the middle of the season, a la trade or just in terms of scheme? Have the Kings just magically snap things back into focus and they're going to go on a run? Um, Clippers, I mean, we've talked about them. I think that there's some maybe teams with higher end, top end talent that have not sorted themselves out that maybe could take things over, and Nuggets being foremost among all of them.
Yeah, you just say look at it like that. So like look at the Rockets right now. They're on a 17-7 run. I don't see the Lakers putting together a run like that. I don't see the Clippers putting together a run like that. Probably not the Timberwolves either. So that's when you kind of really limit it. And then I guess the Suns, you got to include the Suns in that conversation too. So like that's where you're
Yeah.
kind of just like,
No,
I don't know. Can any team have that sort of switch up like we saw Dallas do last year? I'm just not really seeing it right now.
I think if you really had to look at any of these teams putting on a crazy run like that, I
You got to back the
the
Suns to do
Ma
that, I
the
guess.
Mavs can do that. The Mavs can do that. I don't think the Sun. I think you're right about the Suns. I think that we know that's probably not going to happen. And so Mavs and Timberwolves are the two teams that are underachieving the most. And that's going to be a death match
The
trying to
Suns
get
are right up
that
there
sixth
too.
seed.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Mavs, yeah, but like the Mavs, think about that. Like they've been without Kyrie and Luca. They're still 22 and 19.
Yeah.
Kyrie's back now. Hopefully that stays the same. So yeah, the Mavs are obviously from the 7th seed. They're the team. It's them or the Nuggets. Nuggets just behind the Grizzlies. The Mavs are kind of the team you're looking at again to go on another run like they did last year, really.
Yeah. But I think I don't know, it's kind of tie a bow on it. If we're talking about like surprising things that we've seen, if we did a podcast on that, I think top two things would have to be the Rockets being the second seed in the West. And I think pretty close up to it, not for me, but for a lot of people, the Grizzlies, who, if anyone took that bet on the over, I mean, a lot of people were doubting the Grizzlies like doing anything.
Yeah, idiots.
It was, I mean, the bets, the betting
Mm-hmm.
odds were insane. I mean, they were what strike to be the like the eighth seed,
And they were like,
something like.
I want to say they were at like 44 and a half wins or something like that.
Yeah, they're gonna blow that out of the water. And
Yeah.
for those two teams to be there, and I think we can see that being sustainable. I think it's a funny outcome. I mean, it's halfway through the season, sure, but I think it's going to stay that way. And not a lot of people saw that coming.
No, the Rockets definitely they're arguably the surprise package of the entire year. Everyone was like, okay, maybe they'll make the playoffs this year. That was more so
Yeah,
via the play-in.
it'll be a cute experience. It'll be fun to watch them like figure things out. Who are they going
Yeah,
to
and
trade? Who's going to fall out of the rotation? How many different rotations will they have? Dude,
yeah,
Reed
yeah,
Shepard dropping 50 points in the G League can't even like get a minute on the floor because they're that good.
yeah. They're that good, great coach. Ime Udoka is a guy that we always believed in. He'd still be the Celtics coach if it weren't for the other issues that went on. He's a great coach. The Rockets have a hell of a lot of talent. Great to see them doing their thing. Grizzlies are still going to be chasing them, I think, right up there because they've got so much talent as well, and they've done it. They've been there and done it before. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Interesting to talk about the 2021 draft class. I didn't know we were going to go in that deep, but it's actually
Me
interesting to
neither.
have a little look at that. But yeah, Pacers still got some things to figure out, but keep an eye there. The Pistons, just enjoy it. They're probably going to still have a losing season, but it's going to be so much better than anything that they've had recently. Rockets versus Grizzlies, matchup to watch up, continue to go. Maybe we'll get to see it in the playoffs because that'll be a hell of a lot of fun. But for now, thank you for joining me, Chris. Thank you all so much for listening. Remember, we're everywhere on social media at Coast to Coast NBA. And most importantly, remember to take every shot and love every moment.
Peace out.